Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to the Wealthy Trustee webinar. I'm super excited that you guys are here. Put in the chat where you guys tuning in from. Originally, I am from Miami, Florida. I usually am based in Atlanta, but right now I'm in Los Angeles. So, where are you guys located at the moment? So, tonight I have a short presentation planned for you guys. So we're going to talk about, I see Chicago. I'm going to be in Chicago tomorrow. Chicago, Chi-Town, awesome. So who else? Where are you guys from? Where are you guys tuning in from? Okay, we have Virginia. No way. Yes way. Atlanta. Okay. That's where I'm based. Atlanta, LA, from New York. Okay, I'm in LA right now. I'm in Woodland Hills. Awesome. Miami, exactly. That's the hometown, born and raised. Awesome. We have a lot of LA and Georgia. Okay. I love it. Denver, Colorado. I have never been to Colorado, but that's beautiful. Awesome. So we're from all different cities and states across the United States. I love this. So I have a short presentation for you guys. Tonight, what we're going to be doing is we are going to be talking about all things dealing with trust. What I want to do is I want to teach you how to become a trustee, okay? So a lot of us, we're not familiar with what a trust is. We've heard of terms like trust fund and trust fund baby, but we really don't know what it actually means or what a trust is. So what I want to do is I want to give you some information. I want to provide knowledge and education so that you can do your research and your due diligence to see if a trust is the right thing for you and your family, okay? So with that being said, we're going to dive right in, but before we dive in, let me introduce myself. For those of you guys who are not familiar with me, my name is Christina Yvette. I'm the founder of Seven Ways to Wealth. So I am a licensed financial professional and I'm also licensed in real estate. I am not an attorney. I am not a CPA. So I teach from a standpoint of trusteeship. So I have been a trustee for 11 years, a long time, since 2015. I know the ins and outs of operating a trust, of establishing a trust, of administering and managing assets that are owned by a trust, of managing trust funds, things of that nature. So I want to teach you what I know based on experience, okay? So without further ado, let me just quickly let guys know how I got here, right? So originally, my first career was a registered nurse. Okay, so right out of college, I went straight into the hospital and I was living paycheck to paycheck and I was working 12-hour shifts. I was working 5 to 6 days a week in the hospital. And it was very frustrating because I was literally in the rat race. And I was frustrated because at that time, at the beginning of my career, when I was 23 years old, I had a 1-year-old baby. And I was not spending any time with my baby because if you're working 12-hour shifts 5 days a week, you are spending majority of your time in the hospital. So when I realized that I was spending majority of my time in the hospital with my coworkers and my patients and not at home with my 1-year-old baby, I told myself something had to change because I can't just let, my son be raised by my mom, right? And so I'm like, okay, well, I need to find another stream of income. Like I need to find, money somewhere. I need to start a business. I need to do something. I can't just depend on my paycheck that I get from the hospital. So one day I'm driving to work and this guy named Than Miro, he comes on this little ad and he's like, "Do you want to learn how to flip houses?" And immediately I'm driving to work and I'm like, yes, I want to learn how to flip houses. So he's like, come to my seminar this weekend. So I signed up, spent $200, went to a 3-day seminar, and I learned so much about real estate that I did not know. And that was the best $200 that I ever spent in my life. And that was the first time that I ever invested in myself. And that is where I learned so much to the point that I started my business. So 6 months after that seminar, I established my real estate investment fund, my real estate investment firm, and then I bought my first property, right? And I bought this property zero down. So I didn't spend any of my own money. I got 100% financing from my hard money lender. And my hard money lender, I looked him in the face and I said, "Will you be my mentor?" And he looks at this young, 24-year-old girl, and he's like, "Okay, I'll be your mentor." So he gave me all the money for this property. I bought the property in the LLC, and then he's like, "No, no, no, Christina, you have to put that property into a trust." And I'm like, what is a trust? I don't know what a trust is, right? But I'm talking to someone who has a net worth of $200 million dollars in real estate. So I'm like, okay, whatever you tell me to do, I'm going to do it. So he gave me the ins and outs and educated me on what a trust is and why it was so important. Now you have to understand, right? At that point, this was my first property. I've never owned real estate before. It was owned in an LLC and it was being renovated, right? Because it was a house that I was flipping. So I did not want someone to get injured, on the job and they sue me and come after my property and take the property away, right? This is the first piece of real estate that I've ever owned. So I listened to him and I established a trust and I transferred that property from the LLC into the trust. I end up selling that property. I bought it for $89,000. It was beat up little two bedroom, one bath house. I bought it for $89,000. I sold it for $235,000. So I made six figures off of this property. This was my first property ever. And when I realized that I can make six figures off of, real estate and off of one property, it changed my entire life, right? It changed my entire life to where now I have a seven-figure portfolio and I was able to retire myself. So I ended up retiring myself from nursing when I was 31 years old. So I only spent 8 years in my career, and that's because I made the decision to do so because I was intentional, but also because I was structured the right way, because I had a trust and I was building wealth intentionally through real estate with that trust, right? So what I want to do is I want to educate you guys and I want to teach you the formula that I used in order to retire myself at a very young age. I told myself I'm not waiting till I'm 65, right? I want to travel the world. I've been to 30 different countries. I want to travel the world. I want to be able to, take my children to school, things like that. So I wanted that time freedom, that location freedom, and also the financial freedom. And a trust was one of the key factors that actually set me free. So I needed the trust first before I was able to get out of my career and before I was able to replace my income. So let me go ahead and share my slides. One second. Let's see. Where is it? Hold on. There it is. All right. So let's talk about what a trust is, okay? So a trust is an entity. It is a living, breathing entity, just like you, just like me. So a lot of us, we don't know that we are entities, okay? And so we really are. Now, if you think about it, right? Out here in society, how are you operating? You have to understand that you're operating as an entity because any little thing that you do, they're asking you for your name. Who are you? You have to identify yourself. And they're asking you for your social security, right? So if you're going for a job, they ask you for your name and your social. If you're going to buy a house or rent an apartment, they're asking you for your name and your social. If you're going to get a credit card or open up a bank account, or if you're going to enroll in school, whatever it is that you want to do, when you're operating in society, they're asking you for your name and your social. It's the same thing with the trust, right? So with the trust, you have to understand that it is also an entity and that they're also going to ask for that name of the trust and that 9-digit number that's equivalent to a social, which we call it an EIN number, which is an employer identification number, okay? So now that we understand that it is an entity, you have to understand that this trust, right, is one of the most powerful entities in the world, and it can do anything and everything that you can do. So for example, if you can buy a house, a trust can buy a house. If you can build credit, a trust can build credit. If you can be an author of a book, a trust can be an author of a book, right? So there's no limitations to what a trust can and cannot do, which is absolutely beautiful. Now, how does this trust come into existence? How does it become an entity, right? Well, it is what we call a contractual entity, which means that you have to establish a contract in order for this entity to come into existence, okay? And so the way that we establish this contract is it is a contract between several different parties. We're going to legalize this contract and then we are going to operate the contract. Now, with this contract, there's two very important sections. There's many different sections. I can't explain all of the sections right now, but there's two important ones that I want you to know of. The first one is the declaration of trust, right? And so of this declaration in the contract, you're declaring what it is and what it is not. Remember, there's hundreds of different types of contracts. What is this contract, right? And so this contract is you are actually creating a trust by contract, right? And you're not creating a corporation. You're not creating an LLC. You're not creating a partnership or a joint venture or any other form of a contract, okay? The next part is the bylaws. That is the terms and conditions of how you want the trust to be operated, right? So you have to go ahead and set those terms and conditions, which we call provisions, so that the trust can be managed by the person who's intended to manage it. So now let's talk about the different parties involved in this contract, okay? The first one is the grantor. So the grantor is the creator of the trust. That is the individual who is going to establish the trust for the benefit of someone else. That someone else is the beneficiary, okay, or the inheritor of the trust. So with the grantor, some other terms that you might hear is settlor or trustor, okay? And so that is the person who not only establishes the trust, but puts the first asset into the trust. They do what we call fund the trust, right? So whatever that first asset is, they're going to donate it or gift it into the trust. The second party involved is the trustee. The trustee is the only party that is going to serve as the fiduciary of the trust. So they're going to be operating the trust on a day-to-day basis for the beneficiaries of the trust, okay? So the trustee, right, they are going to be managing the assets that are inside of the trust. They're going to be managing the trust funds. They're going to be operating the trust on a day-to-day basis. They are going to be doing the hiring, the firing, pretty much everything that is administrative and operational, okay? Now, the next party is the beneficiary. So that is the inheritor of the trust. That's the individual who is going to be inheriting the assets that are placed inside of the trust once the trust is terminated, okay? So when you're creating a trust, you have to determine how long you want this trust to exist for. You can say 50 years, you can say 100 years. It just depends on you. And so once that trust expires, then those assets are going to be disposed of. And so they're going to go straight to the beneficiaries, okay? So typically your beneficiaries are going to be like your children or your next of kin, whoever you want to inherit those assets, okay? But before the trust is expired, those assets are going to be held in the trust and the beneficiaries are going to be able to benefit from those assets or those trust funds, meaning that they're going to be receiving gifts from the trust. They're also going to be receiving distributions from the trust. So that's kind of like a monthly or quarterly allowance that they're going to be receiving, okay? So now that we understand the different parties involved in the trust, right? Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. So that is the different types of trust. So there are hundreds of different types of trust. You have to do your research and your due diligence to choose the best one for you and your family, okay? So what I want to do is I want to give you a couple different categories that every single trust falls under so that you can better understand the different types of trust. So the first category that I want to give you is express versus implied. An express trust is a written trust. So that means that it's tangible, it's on that contract style, it's printed, it's on paper, you can touch it, you can actually physically sign it, right? So that means that there's a verbal agreement that happened and you're expressing it on a contract versus an implied trust. An implied trust means that that verbal agreement stayed verbal, it stayed oral, it never was expressed or never made it into writing, okay? The next category that I want to give you is simple versus complex. So a simple trust is shorter in nature, and the trustee is required to distribute all the money that's inside of the trust, right? Versus a complex trust is longer in nature. That means that there's more provisions or rules and regulations, and the trustee is not required to distribute all the money that's inside of the trust, okay? The next category that I want to give you guys is discretionary versus non-discretionary. So a discretionary trust is where the trustee has full discretion to be able to make decisions for the trust that's not embedded inside of the contract. For example, let's just say that the trustee wanted to go buy Bitcoin tomorrow. The trustee can do that if the trust is discretionary and they're able to do so. Because if it's non-discretionary, that means that the trustee is not able to make those decisions for the trust. That means that they would not be able to go and buy the crypto because nowhere in the trust contract does it say anything about investing in crypto, okay? The next category that I want to give you guys is statutory versus non-statutory. So a statutory trust is where, so every single state has their own statutes and codes, and with that, they can either be embedded inside the contract or not. So with a statutory trust, what we're saying is that the state statutes and codes are embedded inside of the contract, which means that the trust is limited to where it can only be used in that one state because of the state statutes and codes, okay? And because it can only be used in that one state, it has to be registered, which means that it becomes a part of the public record for anyone and everyone in that state to be able to know the existence of the trust. So that means that they know, they are able to see the entire contract, the net worth, who the beneficiaries are, what assets you have placed in there, right? Versus the other type. So the other type is non-statutory, which means that there are no state statutes and codes embedded inside of the contract. So because there are no state statutes and codes, that means that you can operate this trust in all 50 states plus all of the U.S. territories. That means you can use it in the entire nation and not just only in one state, right? And that means that it doesn't have to be registered on the public records for that particular state, which means that you get to remain private and no one is going to know of the contents of the contract, right? They don't know what the net worth is, who the beneficiaries are, things of that nature, which is what you want. All right. And so then the last category that I want to give you guys is revocable versus irrevocable. So every single trust is going to fall under those two categories. And when we are referring to revocable versus irrevocable, we are only referring to one party. That one party is the grantor. So we're saying that the grantor either has revocability or irrevocability, okay? So now, when we're talking about a revocable trust, what we're saying is that the grantor has the ability to be able to make changes for the trust. They are able to remove the trustees and beneficiaries. They're able to take back property. They're able to terminate the trust at any point in time, right? And so because it's revocable, typically what happens is the grantor is going to also serve as the trustee and the beneficiary. So that means that the grantor is going to be all three. Okay, so because the grantor is all three, right, serving in all three parties, that means that this type of trust is seen as their alter ego. So that means that this type of trust is going to be operating under the grantor's social security number, which means that if there's any creditors that are coming after the grantor, they can also come after the trust, which means that unfortunately your assets are not protected with a revocable trust, okay? Versus the irrevocable trust. So with the irrevocable trust, what we're saying is that the grantor has irrevocability. So that means that the grantor has no power and no control, and the grantor cannot be the trustee or the beneficiary. So these have to be three separate individuals, okay? So the grantor is not going to be able to take back property that they placed inside of the trust. They are not going to be able to make any changes to the trust. They cannot remove trustees or beneficiaries, and they cannot terminate the trust, okay? And so this type of trust, an irrevocable trust, is seen as a separate entity from the grantor. And this type of trust is going to operate with its own EIN number and not under the grantor's Social Security, which is good because if there's any creditors that are coming after the grantor, they cannot come after the trust because the trust is a separate entity, right? And so that means that your assets are going to be fully protected with an irrevocable trust, okay? So let's continue on. All right, so now when it comes to you actually establishing a trust, right? So step one is you want to determine the type of trust that you actually want to create. Now, I gave you a list of different categories that every single trust falls under. So if you want what we call a bulletproof trust, where that trust is going to hold up in court and where it's going to fully protect your assets, then you want it to fall under the following categories. So you want it to be expressed. So that means it's on a contract, right? It's in black and white, it's on paper, it's in writing. You want it to also then be complex in nature. You want it to be non-statutory, you want it to be discretionary, and lastly, you want it to be irrevocable. So it should fall under those five categories in order for that trust to truly be bulletproof and for that trust to actually protect all of the assets that you place inside of the trust. Okay, so it's going to be impenetrable, which is what you want, right? Ultimately, these assets that you work so hard for, you need to be able to protect them for the next generation. Okay. All right, so let's move on to number two. So in number two, we're going to determine the name of the trust. So just like how when you were born, they gave you a name, it's the same thing with the trust. When the trust is established, you're going to give the trust a name, okay? Now, please don't make the following mistakes. So I see people make these two mistakes, and I want you to avoid them. The first mistake that I see people make is that they will name the trust after themselves. So for the example, if their name is John Smith, they're going to name the trust the John Smith Trust. That is the biggest mistake that you can make. So don't do that. You want to be able to have the trust have its own name and not named after you, because you have to understand that you are creating this trust for protection and also for privacy. So it's a dead giveaway if you're naming the trust after yourself, okay? So don't name the trust after yourself. The other thing is that you don't have to have the word trust in the actual name. It's not like a corporation or LLC where it has to end in LLC, right? So a trust doesn't have to end in the word trust. So for example, let's just say that your favorite flower is roses, right? And so you can call your trust Rose's estate, right? And so no one's going to know that John Smith is associated with Rose's estate, right? So those are two very distinct words, and it's not going to be traced back to you easily, okay? So just think about that when you're naming your trust, because naming your trust is one of the most important steps. Now, the next thing that you have to do outside of naming your trust is you have to appoint the different parties. Remember, we said this is a three-party contract, so you have a grantor, a trustee, and a beneficiary. Now, it depends on the type of trust, right? So remember, we said if you're doing a revocable trust, then you are going to be the grantor, trustee, and beneficiary, but your assets are not going to be protected. So the best type of trust is an irrevocable trust, but you can't be all three. So you have to pick and choose one position. So I recommend that you choose to be the trustee because that is the position where you have full control. You're operating the trust on a day-to-day basis, right? And the grantor has no power and no control. So you're going to choose someone to be in that position. And then you're going to choose your beneficiaries. Your beneficiaries typically are your children, right? The people that you want to inherit. So it could be your spouse, your next of kin, your children, whoever you want to inherit those assets, okay? And then lastly, another very important position is your successor trustee. That is the person who's going to take over after you in the event that something happens to you, right? So in the event that you become incapacitated, that you decide that you want to resign, or if you transition and you don't wake up tomorrow, then you need a succession plan in place. You need someone who's readily available to pick up where you left off, right? And so that is your successor trustee. Your trust cannot operate without a trustee. And if you don't wake up tomorrow, then you need to ensure that someone can take over and continue to operate that trust, right? Because if not, then it's going to be detrimental to the trust, because the trust is then going to end up in court for there to be a court-appointed trustee, and you don't want that to happen, okay? So let's move on to number three. So in number three, we're actually going to create the trust contract, right? And so that's where we're going to put all of the terms and conditions of how we want the trust to be operated by the trustee. Now, one of the most important provisions that we put in there are spendthrift provisions. So a spendthrift is what we call a beneficiary that wants to dissipate the wealth. They want to spend all the money frivolously, and we don't want that to happen. So we want to avoid for them to be spendthrifts. And so what you want to do is you want to put yourself in a position to where you're controlling the money from the grave, right? And that is super powerful. And the way that you're going to control the money from the grave is by putting requirements and restrictions in place, which are called spendthrift provisions. So let me just give you an example of a few. So the first one is you can put an age restriction. So for example, you can say that they have to reach a certain age. Let's just say 21. So we're saying that the beneficiary has to reach the age of 21 before they're able to receive distributions from the trust, right? And so let's just say that their distributions are $10,000 every single month, right? It's highly unlikely that a 2-year-old needs $10,000 a month, but maybe a 21-year-old or 25-year-old or a 30-year-old does. So that's why you want to make sure that they have reached a level of maturity, right? Another one is you might want to put an age restriction, not an age, excuse me, an education restriction in place, right? So for example, you might want to say, hey, beneficiary, you need to have a 4-year college degree, right? Or you need to be trained in financial literacy. You need to have some type of a budgeting course or accounting course or anything like that, right? So you want to be able to have them go through some type of apprenticeship or training so that they are able to have and make good, sound financial decisions, okay? So that they don't turn into that spendthrift. And another restriction that we put in place is a distribution restriction where we are going to tell them what they can and cannot spend the distribution on. So for example, that $10,000 that they're receiving every single month, let's just say that we are going to restrict them and say, hey, you can only use this $10,000 for real estate, education, stocks. You can use it for your living expenses, to buy a car, to get married, things like that, right? And you want to restrict them and tell them what they cannot spend the money on. So you can say, hey, your distribution cannot be spent on illicit drugs, on gambling, on the lottery, on lavish parties, on anything, cigarettes, tobacco, things like that, right? You can give those type of restrictions because if they don't abide by it, then they're not going to qualify for future distributions. And when I tell you that these beneficiaries want to receive distributions from the trust, so they're going to be able to abide by those restrictions, okay? So now that we went and established the right provisions, let's move on to step four. So in step four, we are going to go ahead and notarize the trust. Okay, so the trust needs to be notarized by two individuals. So two signatures are required. It's the grantor signature as well as the trustee signature. Okay, so those two signatures are going to be witnessed by a notary public, and that individual, after witnessing those signatures, they're going to place their seal. So once they sign and place their seal on the contract, then the contract becomes legalized, and then the trustee is able to operate the contract. So once the trustee is able to operate this trust as an entity after the contract is legalized, then the first thing that's going to happen is you have to fund the trust. So remember, we heard that term trust funds. So what you want to do is you want to establish a banking relationship with a financial institution so that you're able to house trust funds, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to open up a bank account. Now, the types of accounts that you can qualify for a trust are checking accounts, savings accounts, money market accounts, cash management accounts, and even brokerage accounts. And the type of financial institutions are banks, credit unions, and brokerages, right? And so there's two very important pieces of information that you're going to have to bring with you in order for you to open up this type of account on behalf of the trust, right? So this account is going to be held in the name of the trust, and what you're going to bring is a certificate of trust, right? Which proves the identity of the trust. So just like how you as an individual, you walk around with a state ID. If somebody asks you for identification, you are able to provide them with a ID that has a short snapshot of who you are. It has your name, your address, it has an ID number, your date of birth, things of that nature, right? Well, the certificate of trust has all those identifying factors as well for the trust. It has the name of the trust. It has what we are called that is equivalent to a date of birth, which is the establishment date. It has a 9-digit number. It has the address of the trust, things of that nature, okay? So you want to be able to prove that the trust does exist in order for the bank to be able to open up that bank account, okay? So now what's going to happen is after you provide the certificate of trust, then you also want to provide the employer identification confirmation letter that you're going to receive from the IRS. So an EIN is not required, but it's recommended because it is very challenging for you to get a bank account without an EIN. So we specifically apply for EINs for banking purposes. And so you're going to bring that confirmation letter with you to the bank, as well as proof of identity that you are the trustee and that you're going to be the authorized signatory for that account. So now the bank is going to go ahead and open up the account for you. Once they open up the account, you have to go ahead and fund the account. So you're going to fund it with whatever you want, right? Whatever amount of money that you want to place inside of that trust fund, or whatever the bank's minimum is. So some banks, their minimum is $0. Some are $100. Some are 500. Some are 1,000. It depends on the bank. Every single bank has different policies and procedures, and you want to just abide by those so that you are able to get the account for the trust. Okay. So we are all done with being able to open up that trust account for the trust. That's where you're going to house trust funds, okay? So now that we have funded the trust with whatever minimum we want, let's just say it's $1,000, right? Now we're going to move on to the very last step, which is the most important step. The most important step is for you to actually legally transfer assets into the trust, right? So if these assets are not in the name of the trust, then they are not protected. Okay. So for example, this is the mistake that I see majority of the people make. And it is actually very detrimental, right? So when you are placing an asset into the trust, you're going to put it in one of the very important sections in the indenture, okay? So the section that you're going to place it into is the Schedule B. So that's where you're going to list, for example, let's just say that you're listing real estate there. So you're going to go ahead and list the real estate exactly the way you need to on the Schedule B. After you've listed the real estate, right, then what you need to do is you have to understand that when you went and purchased this real estate, let's just say that is your primary residence, right? So when you went and purchased this real estate, right, they gave you a deed to represent that you're the owner of the property. And so now what is going to be required of you is that you have to go ahead and transfer that deed of that property from your personal name into the name of the trust. Okay. So that's so vitally important, right? And so now that property has to be redeeded over. And so now that you have prepared a new deed and you've transferred it from your personal name into the name of the trust, then you're going to go ahead and submit it with the county recorder's office. They're going to go ahead and process the new deed. And then they're going to update the public records to show that the new owner of the property is the trust. So you are no longer the owner of the property. So that trust has to legally be the owner of that house in order for that house to be protected in the trust, okay? And this is the biggest mistake that I see people make, because they'll go ahead and establish a trust and never legally transfer their primary residence into the trust. And so I don't want you to make the same mistake, okay? So just be mindful that transferring or reconveying those assets are the most important thing that you want to do after establishing the trust, okay? So let's continue on. All right, so what can a trust actually protect you from, right? So when you are establishing a trust, right, the reason why you are establishing a trust is for protection as well as privacy, okay? So a trust can protect you from bankruptcy, from divorce, from foreclosures, from heavy taxations, from lawsuits, and from even probate, right? So let's just talk about a few. So first, let's talk about divorce, right? So a divorce is a transfer of wealth between two spouses, okay? And so unfortunately, it's that lawsuit where you have two spouses and sometimes one spouse will end up with everything and the other spouse will end up with nothing, right? And so what happens is in those court proceedings, what happens is that they're going to include everything that's in your personal name, meaning all of your liabilities as well as all of your assets, right? And the beautiful thing is that if you have a trust, you are not the trust is not you. So everything that you have inside of that trust is protected and cannot be pulled into your divorce. So for example, if that trust has a house and $100,000 inside of that trust fund account, the judge and the attorneys, they cannot pull that trust into your divorce, okay? So that's one way that you can be protected. Let's talk about heavy taxes, right? Because a lot of us were not aware that the IRS taxes us when we die, right? So there's something called a death tax. There's also something called an inheritance tax. And if you have a trust and if you're transferring wealth through a trust, then those two forms of taxes will not be their inheritance will not be subject to those taxes. A lot of us were giving away half of our income to the IRS, right? So especially if we're in states like this one, California, as well as New York, right? It is just absolutely phenomenally crazy how much the taxes are, right? And so what you want to do is you want to reduce your tax liability as much as possible, and a trust can actually help you do that, right? So that's just one form of a way that you can protect your income so that the money that you're saving on taxes, that money can then be allocated to assets, okay? So that you can build wealth for the trust. Let's talk about lawsuits, right? Because a lot of us, we are walking around thinking that we're not going to get sued. And so we're going to wait until we're going to get sued to prepare ourselves for a lawsuit, which is the biggest mistake that you can make because a lawsuit can come out of nowhere. So you need to prepare yourself now because we live in a very sue-friendly country. We live in the United States of America where everyone wants to sue you, meaning your neighbor wants to sue you, your sibling wants to sue you, your parent wants to sue you. Your employer wants to sue you, your employee wants to sue you, your tenants, your clients, your customers, everybody. Everybody wants to sue you. So you have to be able to protect yourself from a lawsuit before it happens, okay? So um, this is, one of the ways that you can protect yourself is through establishing a trust, right? So let's just say that you're a business owner, right? And if you're a business owner, and let's just say one of your clients, they decide, oh, well, I bought a candle from you and my house burnt down, right? So now it's easy for them to find out who the owner is. Why? Because you decided that you were establishing an LLC and that you were going to be the owner of that LLC. So what does LLC stand for? So you guys can come off mute. Let me know what you think. What does LLC stand for?
Limited liability company.
It sure
Liability
does.
company.
Thank you for saying that. You are absolutely correct. Yes. So it stands for Limited Liability Company. So now you actually hear it in the actual name of the company, right? So if the company has limited liability, who do you think has the other part of that limited liability?
Government?
Not the government.
Courts.
Court?
Courts.
You do. You are responsible for the other part.
Yes.
Repeat
You.
the question.
You.
Yes, the owner, the owner.
Yeah,
So,
you.
so when you set up that LLC, did you list yourself as the owner?
No,
Mm.
I did not.
No. Okay. So who's the owner of your company?
Trust.
The trust.
You have a trust?
Trust.
You have a trust?
No.
Okay. So, if you listed yourself as the owner of your LLC, then yes, you are liable. Okay. So whatever happens to that LLC, the company has limited liability, and whatever the company cannot cover, you as the owner have to cover. So let's go back to the example, right? So the example that we are going through right now is you have a candle business. It's an LLC. One of your customers says, "Hey, my house burned down because of your candle." And now they go to the Secretary of State's website, they look up your LLC, boom, and they find out who the owner is, which is you. So I don't know if you know this, but anything dealing with your LLC is a part of the public records. It's on the Secretary of State's website where you went to establish that LLC or even your corporation. Okay. So everything is available there. They are able to find out the business information as well as the owner's information. So now they go to sue the business, right? And let's just say that throughout that lawsuit, the judge is like, yep, it was your candle that caused that house to burn down. It was a $500,000 house. Now you have a judgment for $500,000, right? But the LLC doesn't have $500,000 to be able to cover that judgment. So now what can happen is the judge can decide to pierce through the corporate veil. The corporate veil is that itty bitty little piece of protection that you thought you had with the LLC. A lot of people, they have this tiny little umbrella thinking that they're protected when in fact they are not really protected. Okay, so your protection is limited. It says it in the actual name of the entity. Okay, so now that you know that you have limited liability and protection, right? And the judge decides, well, we're going to pierce through the corporate veil and we're going to go after the authorized member, which is you. So now they decide to go after you. So what they can do is they can garnish anything that you have, meaning they can garnish your wages, right? If you were getting income from a W-2 or a 1099, they can garnish that income. They can also garnish all of your bank accounts, right? If you have joint accounts, if you have any type of accounts, they can garnish, meaning take every single last penny from those accounts, right? Now they can also seize assets. So they can seize your primary residence, your house where you live, where you and your children live. They can seize your primary residence. They can seize your vehicles. If you have art, if you have jewelry, whatever it is, they can take it from you. Why? Because they have to fulfill that judgment. You just got sued and you lost. And now it's time to pay up because the LLC can't cover it. So they're going to go after you. So you want to protect yourself from a lawsuit. You do not want to wait until you're getting sued. Now, me personally, I talk to hundreds of people every single week. And there has been several instances where I would talk to an individual and they're like, yeah, I've been knowing about trust for 5 years. I do want to set up a trust. And then 3 months later, 6 months later, they're like, hey, Christina, I need to set up a trust now. I'm getting sued. And it's like, I talked to you 6 months ago and you weren't getting sued. And now you come back around full circle after, after they've initiated a lawsuit, right? So this has happened dozens of times, and I don't want you to fall in that position, right? So please protect yourself from a lawsuit. Now, let me give you the same scenario, and let's just say that you decided that you wanted to protect yourself, right? So what does it look like when you have a business, right? So let's just say you have this LLC, right? But you decide, hey, I don't want to be the owner of my LLC. I need a layer of protection between me and the LLC. Then what you can do is you can establish a trust, right? Specifically a business trust, right? One that is designed to conduct business, okay? So you can set up that trust, and then that trust is now going to be the owner of the LLC. So you're going to remove yourself from the public records. You're going to remove yourself as the authorized member. You're going to add the LLC now. You're going to add the business trust as the owner of the LLC. So now when that customer comes to sue your candle company, right, then what's going to happen is there's going to be that judgment But instead of them going after you, they're going to go after the trust because the trust is going to take 100% liability for that LLC, which is what you want. So you need to have a layer of protection between you and the LLC. You do not want to be the direct owner of the LLC, okay? That is you doing a disservice to yourself as well as to the company, okay? So with that being said, go ahead and protect yourself from a lawsuit. So what I want to do really quickly is I want to show you an example of what this looks like. Hold on.
Just a quick story of why I'm here. I was sued. I lost everything. And when I say everything, I'm talking about a $700,000 house. I'm talking about 4 vehicles. I'm talking about my bank account. I'm talking about my life savings. I believed in having 6 months of expenses put up, saved up just in case anything happened, lost the career and stuff like that. All of that was gone. And there was no protection for me. Then I had my 3rd bout with cancer. I haven't had any income since 2020, since COVID. As I told you, I think yesterday, I've been looking for a way to protect myself because I have children that are going to depend on me. So I would encourage anyone that would listen to anything that has been taught and said by you, please, 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 if you work hard to gain assets, do whatever you can do to protect your assets. Why do you think they've hid this from us for so long? Why do you think they were the only ones that were saying trust fund babies? It was because they were the only ones who were privileged to know this, who was privy to this knowledge. Now we have it through Christina. And I thank you for your level of knowledge and for not being a gatekeeper and for giving us what we need to know in order to make this happen. So please, 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 if you endeavor to get anything in this world and to keep anything in this world, please, please, please protect it. Get your trusts. And I have no reason other than my knowledge and what I've been through. But the only reason I'm here is because I've been through it. So I would encourage anyone.
Exactly. So this is what we want you to avoid, right? We want you to avoid situations like this where you are putting yourself in a position to where someone can take everything from you, right? Everything that you work so hard for. So our biggest asset is our primary residence, right? So I have a question for you. If your biggest asset is your primary residence, right? That's the most expensive thing that you own, right? 300,000, 400,000, 500,000, a million, whatever the cost of your house is, right? Let me ask you this. If you didn't wake up tomorrow, how is that house going to be transferred to your son's name or to your daughter's name or to your spouse or whoever you want that house to go to? So somebody come off mute and let me know. How is that transfer going to happen? This house,
Through
your primary
probate.
residence. Yeah, so your primary residence is in your name. It's in your personal name. If you don't wake up tomorrow, and I'm telling you, tomorrow is not promised. Tomorrow is not promised. The people that did not wake up today, a lot of them didn't think that. They thought they were going to wake up. So, you're right. It's going to take a judge, all right? So it's going to take a judge to be able to make that decision if your son or if your daughter gets your house. Now, let me
That's
ask you, yes, is that what you want? That judge does not know you at all. Never met you a day in his life. That judge does not know your son. That judge does not know your daughter. But because you didn't have your affairs in order and that house was in your personal name, How are you going to be able to transfer ownership from a dead person? You're not able to sign that property over to your son or your daughter. So how else is it going to happen? This is something we don't think about. So please tell me, why is that house in your name? I'll tell you in just a moment. So now, unfortunately, it is going to take the judge to be able to do that. And so that is going to be through the probate process, which is what she just said, right? That's going to be through the probate process. Now, unfortunately, all of us are going to go through probate unless we do this one thing. There's only one way to avoid probate, and that one way is by setting up a trust, because a trust is the only way to avoid probate. An LLC is not going to help you avoid probate. A corporation is not going to help you avoid probate. The only entity that will avoid probate is a trust, because it's an estate. It is in a living estate. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to create your living estate now while you're living, right? You don't want to wait. So this is exactly. So this is what happens, right? So um a lot of us, we don't know that our children are losing their inheritance. And unfortunately, I'm sitting here today to let you know that I'm witnessing it. Our children are losing their inheritance because we don't have our affairs in order, right? And so it's going to take us to be able to be courageous. It's going to take us to be able to get the knowledge and information. It's going to be able to us to sacrifice and establish this type of living estate and get our affairs in order so that our children don't have to go through this, because this is what the probate process looks like. So this, let's just say that you have the primary residence, which is your house, right? You have a vehicle, and you have $100,000 in the bank, cash, right? In your checking account. So you got three assets. You did not wake up tomorrow. The first thing that's going to happen is the state where you're resident, they are going to create an estate for you. So they're going to create a living estate for a dead person. Okay. So they're going to call it the John Smith estate. And then they're going to transfer all of your assets, everything that's in your personal name, which is the house, the car, and the cash. They're going to transfer it into the living estate that they created for you. And this living estate is now going to go straight into the probate court system. So now that it's in the probate court system, the first thing that needs to happen is it needs to be represented by a probate attorney, right? Then the second thing that happens is the judge is going to start to pay off your liabilities. So whatever liabilities you have, meaning the creditors, when I tell you the creditors, they come out of nowhere. They come out of the woodworks. You have student loan companies from 30 years ago coming out of nowhere, right? So what happens is the judge decides to, remember you had $100,000 in cash, right? The judge decides to start paying off the liabilities. So you have credit cards, you have maybe a mortgage, you have maybe a car loan, you have personal loans, you have student loans, right? There's so many bills, right? You probably have an old cable bill, an old internet bill, all this stuff. Creditors are coming after nowhere, out of nowhere, right? And then, so now the judge is paying off all of this debt. But then one thing that we don't think about is the medical bills. Do you know how much medical bills you're going to rack up at the end of life? We don't know. So let's just say that you were sitting in the ICU for a week. Do you know how expensive that is? Easily $150,000 for you sitting in the ICU for a week. Or maybe you went to rehab, or maybe you went to a nursing home, or maybe, you know, something else. So you are not sure. And a lot of us, we think, okay, well, I have health insurance, right? No, 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 no. These health insurance companies, they want to be reimbursed, right? So you have Medicare, you have Medicaid, right? The state, those programs, they want to be reimbursed. So those are the first organizations that are going to be coming after your estate, right? And so let's just say, once again, you owe 150,000 in medical bills because you were sitting in the ICU for a week. Where do you think that money's going to come from? You only had 100,000 in your bank account and they just paid off all your credit cards and student loans. So now all of the cash is exhausted. It's done. So now the judge decides, well, let's liquidate the asset. You only had a car and a house. So the judge decides, let's sell the house. Do you know how many houses? If you go on realtor.com, if you go on Zillow.com, those are my favorite websites. I'm on those websites more than I'm on Google. If you go on those websites and look at how many houses are for sale, right? And they've been sitting on the market for 180 days, for 300 days. Those are houses that are stuck in probate. Don't take my word for it. Look at it yourself. Do your research, do your due diligence. I need you to see this with your own eyes because we're walking around here unknowing. Like we don't know what's going to happen because we bought into the lie that society told us, which is, I only have one son. Everything's going to my one son. No, it's not. The judge is going to sell your house so that Medicare can get paid off $200,000. Because you decided to buy into the lie, because you decided not to set up your trust, because you decided not to get your affairs in order, because you decided, not to think about estate planning, retirement, right? Protection of your assets, right? We are so focused on making money, making money, making money. Well, how are you going to protect what you just bought, what you just invested in? Your largest investment is your house, right? So now, the judge decides to liquidate your assets. So now you have your son and your daughter that are in the probate process, in the court system, and they're fighting to keep mom's house. They're fighting to keep dad's house. And sometimes we've seen it to where they're fighting each other. Why? Do you know how intense it is to be in that situation? So they're either fighting each other or fighting the court system, right? So you do not want to put your family in that position because now, after they're done liquidating the assets, whatever is left over is what your children get. So I'm here to tell you that your children are getting the leftovers. Is that what you want? Whatever is left over is what they get, versus you already know that you want your son and your daughter to receive your house. You already know that you want them to receive the $100,000 in the bank account. You already know you want them to receive the car. So why would you let them go through probate? You want them to avoid probate. So this is what you're going to do. This is the only way. In order for you and your family to avoid probate, you're going to establish your living estate, your trust. Now, while you're living, right now, while you're living, you're going to establish your trust. You're going to transfer that property, that house that you live in right now with your children. You're going to transfer that deed into the trust. You're going to transfer the title of that vehicle into the trust. You're going to open up a bank account in the name of the trust, and you're going to do a wire transfer for that $100,000 from your personal checking account into the trust fund, right? And so now all three of those assets are in the name of the trust and they're fully protected, right? And this is how you're going to avoid probate, because now if you don't wake up tomorrow, guess what? There's nothing in your personal name. Everything is going to remain intact because the trust is still existing, right? Last time I checked, when you went to go establish your trust, you set it up for 100 years. That trust is designed to outlive you. So that trust still exists. That trust is still living and breathing. That trust is the owner of those assets. Not you. You transitioned. You're dead and gone, but the trust is not. And you had a succession plan in place. So you had a successor trustee that you nominated to say, hey, if anything happens to me, you're going to take over. So now you didn't wake up tomorrow. The successor trustee now steps up to the plate and they begin to operate the trust where you left off, and everything remains intact. So, one, your family gets to avoid probate. Two, the trust is going to remain intact and running for the next 100 years, right? And your children are the beneficiaries, so they're going to be able to receive benefits. So they're going to be able to receive gifts. They're going to be able to receive distributions from that 100,000 or from the rental income of that property, right? And they get to grieve in peace, right? Because you have to understand, right? Your children, they just lost the most important person in their entire life. Their entire life. And the reason I know this is because I lost my mom, right? And so I know what it looks like and what it feels like. So they just lost the most important person, and the last thing that you want them to do is drag them through the court system, through probate, fighting for their inheritance. So now, because you decided to get your affairs in order, they get to grieve in peace. They get to avoid this whole thing. And the most beautiful part about it all is that the debt that you had at the end of life, meaning those medical bills that you racked up in the ICU, the student loans that came out of nowhere, the credit cards that yes, all of that debt dies with you. Those companies and creditors, they have to discharge that debt. Why? They have nothing to come after. Why? Because you had nothing in your personal name. So because the creditors have nothing to go after, they have to discharge the debt. That is what you want. That is what you want your family to experience. That is what it looks like when you decide that you're going to establish a legacy, right? So let's continue. Let's dive right back into the slides. Hold on, let me pull it up. So we got a couple more slides here and then we're going to land this plane, okay? So this is the wealth building formula, okay? This is the exact reason why you're on this call tonight, right? So what I want to teach you now in the next couple of minutes is how to build wealth with the trust, right? So you have three pillars here: structure, credit, and invest, okay? So the first one is structure. So it's very important to have a solid foundation. The foundation of your structure should be a trust. If you don't have a trust within your structure, it's time to get restructured. Now, with everyone's structure, they should have a for-profit and a nonprofit within their structure. So I have an example for you here. And here I have three different types of trusts. I have a business trust, a family trust, and a tax-exempt nonprofit trust. So let's touch on the business trust. So I mentioned it earlier. For my people who are business owners and entrepreneurs, if you have LLCs and corporations, you do not want to own those LLCs and corporations in your personal name. Okay, so you need to establish a business trust so that the business trust can own the LLC. Now, when it comes to the business trust, you can go ahead and establish it and you can operate it in two different ways. So the first way is, let's just say you don't have an LLC or a corporation, then you can establish the business trust, and then from there you can go ahead and operate your business. So let's just say you're doing e-com or real estate or retail or a restaurant. You're able to operate that business through a business trust versus you going and opening up an LLC or a corporation. All right. The second way that you can operate the business trust is as a holding company. So what I mean by this is that the business trust is going to be non-operational, so it doesn't have any employees, it doesn't have any products or services. The whole purpose of that business trust is to be able to own the LLC. So it's going to hold the LLC or the corporation. The LLC is the one that's going to be having the products and the services and the employees and fully operational. Okay. So the business trust is going to own the LLC. Okay. Now that the business trust owns the LLC, whatever income that the LLC generates, that money can be K1 distribution straight to the business trust. Okay. So what we mean by this is, let's just say that your LLC generates $100,000. That whole $100,000 can go straight into the business trust. Okay, which is good. Because now what's going to happen is that money goes straight into the business trust, and now the business trust can use it for operating expenses, right? And so you are automatically done paying taxes for the LLC because all the money went to the owner, right? And so now that all the money is sitting inside of the business trust, right? When it comes to the business trust, the tax, the taxes is anywhere between 10% upwards of 37%, right? So with that, what happens is when you get the 100,000 into the business trust, right? You want to spend the money first and then be taxed on the leftovers, okay? So what happens is you have operating expenses, management fees, you have administration expenses. And so all of that OPEX, you're going to be able to deduct it from your taxes. So what's going to happen is, let's just say that you have $30,000 in operating expenses. So out of this $100,000 that just came in, right? You're going to write off $30,000 in operating expenses. And so now you have $70,000 that's left. So this $70,000, you're going to be taxed on it. Okay. And remember, we said that the tax range is between 10% and 37%. So you're going to be taxed on it. Um, and sometimes you are going to pay a pretty penny. So in order for you to not have to go through that, one of the most beautiful things about a trust that I absolutely love that only a trust can do is, instead of the trust having to pay 70 taxes on $70,000, it can distribute that $70,000 to the beneficiary, which is what you want, right? Because now that it can distribute that 70,000 to the beneficiary, that means that it's also a tax write-off, right? And so you don't have to pay taxes on it. So now that's exactly what we're going to do. So what we do is we make the beneficiary of the business trust the family trust. Why? Because we're business owners and we're entrepreneurs, and we need to be able to have that money flow into the family so that we can provide for the family. Okay. So that's exactly what you are going to do. So now what we're going to do is we are going to distribute $70,000 from the business trust into the family trust. Now on the business trust level, remember, 100,000 came in, 30,000 went to operating expenses, 70,000 went to the distribution of the beneficiary. So that eats up the whole 100,000, which means that you have a 0% tax liability. Okay, so you're done, right? You pay zero taxes on $0. Okay, so now let's move on to the next trust, right? The next trust is the private family trust. With this trust, this is where you're going to house all of your personal assets. So these are your personal assets that has nothing to do with business, nothing to do with LLCs and corporations and things of that nature, right? And so everything personal, meaning your primary residence, maybe a stock portfolio, maybe a crypto portfolio, maybe insurance policies, maybe you have your vehicle, you have jewelry, you have heirlooms, you have art, right? You have intellectual property, right? So there's so many assets that you are able to place in here, even just traditional cash, right? Even other currencies, right? So you're going to go ahead and house all of those assets in your family trust because they're personal, right? These are personal property, right? They have nothing to do with business. So now you're going to list your children as the beneficiary of the family trust, okay? And remember that we just did a distribution from the business trust into the family trust. So that means that the $70,000 went straight into the family trust. So the family trust now has to pay taxes on that money. Okay. So 70,000 came in, and what we get to write off is the operating expenses for the family trust. So what does it cost in order to run the family trust? Well, last time I checked, you have property taxes, you have mortgage or rent, you have grocery, you have kids tuition, you have a vehicle, right, that has maintenance, car note, gas, things like that, right? You have insurance premiums, you have groceries, anything like that, right? So you're able to write off all of those expenses. So let's just say that out of the 70,000, it costs $60,000 in order to operate your family, right? And so now you get to deduct the 60,000 out of the 70, and you have $10,000 that's left. So on a normal traditional basis, because the family trust is a for-profit entity, you would be paying 10% off that $10,000 dollars, right? So that means that you'll have a tax liability of $1,000. Or what you can do is, instead of you having a tax liability, what you can do is you can do what we call a charitable contribution, which is a donation. So you can donate to a charity of your choice. Okay. So that's why we want to have a nonprofit within our structure, because the IRS allows us to do charitable contributions. And we want to establish our own charity so that we're able to contribute directly to our own charity, right? And so that's exactly what you want to do. So now we have donated that $10,000 to our tax exempt nonprofit trust. And so now on the family trust level, what happens is 70 came in, 60,000 was through operating expenses. And then the other 10,000 was a charitable contribution. And so that's the whole 70. And so we have a 0% tax liability. So we are all done paying taxes on the family trust level. So now we're going to go down to the tax exempt nonprofit. So with this type of entity, right, it is a charitable organization, also known as a faith-based organization. So what the IRS allows is there is a separation between church and state. And so the IRS will have a mandatory exemption for you not having to file for a 501c3. And so that means that if you're operating it as a faith-based organization, so meaning like a church or like a religious organization or a school or anything dealing with education or a traditional charity, right? If you're operating it in any one of those forms or fashion, then it will qualify for automatic exemption on the federal level. Okay, so that means that the IRS will automatically exempt you. Now, what happens is with this type of trust, right? You can also be exempt from other forms of taxes, meaning property taxes, city taxes, state taxes, sales taxes, things of that nature. Okay. So there's other forms that you can qualify for, but it's not automatic. Okay. So with that being said, with this type of trust, what we do is we use it to reduce our tax liability. So there's so many advantages when you have a nonprofit within your structure. Okay. So for example, let's just say that you're a W-2 employee, right? If you're a W-2 employee, the IRS will allow you to donate up to 60% of your annual gross income to any charity of your choice, right? So obviously that can be your organization that you have here. So with that being said, if the IRS will allow you to donate up to 60%, and let's just say you're generating 100,000 a year, then that means that they'll allow you to donate up to $60,000, which means that you're only going to be taxed on 40,000 versus 100,000, which means that you're going to be saving hundreds of dollars on, you're going to be saving that on taxes, which that money you can allocate somewhere else, right? You can allocate it towards assets, which is what you want. You want to accumulate assets so the trust is able to sustain itself, okay? So with that being said, let's move on to the next pillar. So in the next pillar, we have credit. So when it comes to credit, right, what I want you to know is that the trust, specifically the business trust, is able to establish business credit. All right, it's the same type of credit that you would get for an LLC or a corporation. It's business credit based off of the EIN, employer identification number. So you want to put yourself in a position to where you're leveraging OPM, other people's money, specifically the bank's money, okay? So that is very, very, very important because a lot of people, they are only focused on their own personal credit, but it's very highly advantageous for you to leverage and for you to build a second credit profile, specifically business credit, because you're going to get higher lines of credit. So on the personal level, they might give you 15,000, but on the business level, they're going to give you 150,000. So that's a big difference, right? Because now you want to do what the bank is doing, right? So what is the bank doing? You have to understand that the banks, right? They're building all of this wealth based off of using OPM, other people's money, specifically your money. So when you get paid every other Friday, your money goes straight to Wells Fargo, right? Straight to Chase Bank, straight to Bank of America, right? And it's just sitting there, right? And so a lot of us, we think that the whole entire, $2,500 check is in there, but in all actuality, it is not. We live in a fractional reserve system. So your whole $2,500 paycheck is not there, right? Only a fraction of it is there because the other money, what they have done is they're utilizing it to where they're lending it out for credit cards, for student loans, for mortgages, for vehicle loans, right? And they're charging high interest and they're getting all that money versus you. How much interest are they giving you? Right? So if you think that your $2,500 is just sitting there in Wells Fargo, how much is Wells Fargo giving you for your $2,500 sitting in there? Not much. So you need to do what the bank is doing, which means that you need to leverage OPM. You need to leverage the bank's money in order for you to park that money in places where it's going to grow. Right? So it's going to take a mindset shift for you to be able to execute this, right? And so where do you want to park that money? Well, let's go to the next pillar because the next pillar is my favorite pillar. These are my two favorite assets. Index universal life insurance policy and real estate, right? So remember at the beginning of the call, I told you that I'm licensed in both of these, right? So in insurance and in real estate, right? So when it comes to these two assets, right? They can put you in a position to where you can accumulate a lot of wealth, okay? And it's not going to take 20, 30, 40 years, right? You can do it in a short period of time. But this is not like get rich quick or anything like that. So let's first talk about the index universal life insurance, okay? So when it comes to this type of policy, right? Unfortunately, a lot of people think that life insurance is supposed to be used when you're dead. But in all actuality, life insurance is supposed to be used when you are living. That's why it's called life insurance. And that's why it's not called death insurance, right? So, because you're supposed to be using it when you're living, there's a lot of living benefits. Let's talk about a few of them. So, one is that you are able to accumulate cash in here and it's tax free. So all the money that you're putting inside of your life insurance policy is tax free, which is good. You want tax free, right? You don't want to be taxed on all of these financial products. The next thing is that it's protected, meaning that if you get sued personally, the judge can't tell you, oh, go ahead and take the money out of the life insurance policy, right? So all the money that you are accumulating inside of your policy is going to be protected from lawsuits, okay? The next component is that it has a death benefit associated with it. So that means that your life is insured, and whenever you transition, you have a beneficiary, and that beneficiary is going to receive a death benefit. Let's just say that the death benefit is $1 million. They're going to receive that $1 million, right? The next component is that let's just say that you go through some type of life-threatening illness and you survive, right? Like a heart attack or cancer, right? They will give you up to 80% of your death benefit now while you're living. So you don't have to worry about going back to work, right? Because they're going to give you $800,000 out of that $1 million, like right now, today, right? So that is going to really come in handy for you and your family. The next component is cash value, cash accumulation, right? So there is another account within your policy, which is cash value. And that means that you're accumulating cash inside of your policy. How do you do this? Well, you have to understand that every single month, right, you are paying your premium. And let's just say that you're paying $100, right? So you're paying the $100, and let's just say, depending on the way that you have structured your life insurance policy, right? Let's just say that there's a split of 80-20, right? Meaning that 20% is going to go to the carrier, and that's the cost of insurance. The other 80% is going to go to your cash value. So if you're paying $100 a month, that means that $20 is going to the insurance company and $80 is going and accumulating in cash. So now you have your cash value and it's accumulating $80, $80, $80, $80, $80 every single month. So that money is going to start to stack up, right? Which is good. That is like what we call the snowball effect, right? So that money is going to start to accumulate. But now there's another component to it. So you see with this specific policy, you see it has the word index. So it's index universal life. So what's happening here is when we are talking about the index, we are referring to an indice in the stock market, okay? So the stock market has many different types of indices. It has the Dow Jones, the Nasdaq, and the S&P 500. So the S&P 500 is tracking the top 500 companies in this country, okay? So usually their performance could be anywhere between 8%, 12%, 15%. It just depends on the market, right? Now, the beautiful thing about this policy is that your money is not going to be invested directly in the stock market. What happens is the carrier wants to mirror the stock market and give you returns based on what the performance is of that indice. So let's just say that the S&P 500 is doing 10%, then what's going to happen is the carrier is going to give you a 10% return on your cash value. Okay. So let's just say it's doing 12%, right? Or let's just say 20. If the S&P 500 is doing 20%, but the insurance carrier says, hey, well, you can only get a maximum of 12, right? But now what if the stock market crashes? Well, that's a beautiful thing. Your money is protected. If the stock market crashes and goes down 20%, you don't lose a dollar, right? You could actually put what we call a floor and say, hey, if the stock market crashes, I want to at least make 1%, right? And so that's what's going to be your floor. So these are very important because now what's happening is because the carrier is mirroring the stock market and giving you those returns, you're now going to be earning compound interest off of your cash value. So what you mean to tell me is that, remember, I have cash accumulating $80, $80, $80, $80, right? And now not only am I accumulating cash, but now I'm earning compound interest as well because I'm earning 10%, 11%, 12% off of what I have inside of the cash value. So that means that your money is working for you. Every single dollar is going out and is bringing back friends, is bringing back 10 cents, 12 cents. So that is exactly what you want. That is the position that you're going to place yourself in so that you are able to no longer have to work for money. You will have your money working for you, okay? Which is what you want. You just have to make sure that you're parking your money in the right vehicle, right? And so the trust is one of those vehicles that you're going to use and it marries the life insurance policies. And this is how we do it, right? So you're going to set up your trust. Your trust is then going to take out the index universal life insurance policy on you. You are going to be the insured. The trust is going to be the owner of the life insurance policy. The trust is going to pay the premiums every single month for that life insurance policy. And the trust is going to be the beneficiary of that life insurance policy. So if anything happens to you, that death benefit is going to go straight to the trust. So if you transition and the death benefit is $1 million, that $1 million is going straight to the trust fund, which is exactly what we want. Okay. So that's just one component. Now, I will talk about that a little bit further in just a moment, but let's move on to the next asset, which is one of my favorite ones, which is real estate. Okay. So I absolutely love real estate. Um, it's just, it's one of the ways for you to truly become financially free. Okay. So what I want you to know is that a trust can own real estate. A trust can take out a mortgage. A trust can get a home equity line of credit. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to be able to acquire real estate for the trust so that the trust can sustain itself. You don't want to be pouring in your W-2 income into the trust, right? You want the trust to be able to sustain itself, and it can do that by way of real estate, okay? Now, the way that we're going to do that is through leveraging OPM. Remember, so we got to use other people's money. So I'm here to tell you today that you are able to purchase real estate without using your own money, okay? So majority of my portfolio, I was able to acquire it without using any of my own money, okay? And when I'm saying $0, I'm saying $0. $0. One of our clients just now, she just left the closing table and she left with a check for $900, right? So that means that she's actually leaving with money instead of bringing money to the closing table. So that is what you want, right? To put yourself in those types of positions, but you have to have the right products, right? So the way that we're able to accomplish this is one, the trust is going to qualify for a mortgage. The type of mortgage that the trust is going to get is a DSCR. So that stands for debt service coverage ratio. Okay. So with that type of mortgage, it is for entities that are purchasing properties that are non-owner occupied. Okay. So that means that we are picking up these properties, but we're not living inside of them. They are specifically for investments and we're putting tenants in them, okay? If they don't already have tenants. So let's just say that you're going to put yourself in a position to where you are buying a property and it is a triplex. So there's 3 doors, 1 roof, right? And so now you are going to get the DSCR loan. Now the DSCR loan is going to lend you up to 80% of the purchase price. So if you're going to get 80% of what it costs to buy this triplex, then you need to find that other 20% somewhere else, right? You're not going to take out of your own money or your W-2 or your savings or anywhere else, right? So go find the 20%. So the way that we do it is we got to go backwards, right? So remember, you're able to build the business credit and you're able to get business credit cards and lines of credit, right? So when we are working on you leveraging OPM, let's just say that you get yourself that business credit card and they're giving you this credit card with a line of credit of or a credit limit of $50,000. So now what you're going to do is you're going to liquidate that credit card. Okay, so this is something that's very easy to do. So now that you have liquidated the credit card, right, you're going to now go, that money is going to go straight into your bank account. So the first thing that you're going to do with that money is you're not going to the closing table with it. You are going to park that money inside of your index universal life insurance policy. So that $50,000 is going straight into your policy. And now your cash value has gone up by $50,000, right? But now, what is the beautiful thing that's happening? Well, it's going to be earning compound interest. Remember, we said the market's giving us 12%. So now that $50,000 is sitting inside of your cash value, earning 12%. So now you just put it to work. That's exactly what you want to do, right? Because at the end of the day, that $50,000 that's sitting in that credit card, that's dead money. It's not making you nothing. So that's why you need to be able to liquidate that credit card and put it to work because now it's going to make you 12%, right? So what you're doing now is now that $50,000 is sitting inside of your cash value, but you need that $50,000 in order to purchase the triplex. So what you're going to do is you're going to contact the carrier and ask them for a policy loan. And now the carrier, they see your policy as collateral. And so they're going to look at your cash value and they're going to be like, okay, John Smith, you have $50,000 sitting in your cash value, we'll lend you 49,000, right? From our reserve, from our bank account, right? And so the carrier is going to do a direct deposit into your trust fund for $49,000, but they're not going to take it out of your cash value. It's literally going to come from their bank account. Okay. So they're issuing you a policy loan because you have those reserves inside of your cash value. So your $50,000 is sitting in your cash value, earning compound interest, earning the 12%, right? And then you just borrowed their $49,000 to be able to make your second transaction. So now that $49,000 is sitting inside of your bank account. So now what you're going to do is you're going to the closing table. You're going to go ahead and purchase that triplex. So now you purchase the triplex, right? And now it's the first of the month. Okay. So it's the first of the month. You have these three tenants. So each door is giving you $2,000. That's $6,000, right? So now you just collected rent for $6,000. So let me ask you, where is the first place that you're going to put this $6,000?
In the IUL.
Yay! What's your name?
Sorry, I'm Tracy.
Hey Tracy. Okay, girl, I'm so proud of you. Yes,
Yeah.
she said it in the IUL. So I know Tracy was listening. Okay, I'm proud of her. So yes, 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 yes. So the $6,000 is going straight into your IUL policy, and your cash value is now going to go up by $6,000. This is exactly what you want to do, right? And so now. Remember, you need that 6,000 in order to be able to deploy it somewhere else, right? So you're going to get a policy loan. They're like, okay, you got 6,000 in there, we'll give you five, right? So they're going to lend you the 5,000, but your 6,000 is still working for you, right? Inside of your IUL. So now you have the 5,000, so you're going to go ahead and deploy it where it needs to go, right? So a portion of it is going to go to the credit card, a portion of it is going to go to the mortgage, and then the other portion is going to go into the trust fund account, right? And so now this is you putting yourself in a position to where you're able to sustain the trust, right? The trust is able to sustain itself. You don't have to pour in your W-2 income into the trust, right? And now you're going to rinse and repeat. You're going to do this over and over again until you're at the point where the trust is replacing your income, right? That is how you're able to retire young. That is how you're able to accumulate cash. That's how you're able to build wealth with a trust, right? Because a lot of us, we have, we bought into the lie that society has told us, right? And we're used to this programming, right? And so there's a lot of things that we're going to have to unlearn. So, what is the programming? The programming is that we bought into the lie that we have to, get a good job, jump into our career, work 40 hours a week for 40 years, and retire when we're 65, right? So that is the lie that we have bought into, and that is the lie. That's the system. And then they want us to be able to depend on Social Security when we're 65, right? And this is highly, highly, highly unfortunate that a lot of people have gone down this road. And that's why you see our elderly that they are still having to work, right? 70, 80s just to cover their prescription. And that is not what we want, right? And so for myself, right, remember I told you at the beginning of the call, I made that decision that that wasn't going to be me. And and let me explain to you quickly how I made that decision, right? So I was 24 years old, and this was like my second year into my career as a nurse. And I had a coworker, her name is Audrey, Miss Audrey. And so one day at work, Miss Audrey, she was extremely tired, right? She was exhausted. She was very tired to the point that she couldn't take care of her patients. And I'm this young girl that's just ripping around the hallways, and I'm taking care of her patients, I'm taking care of my patients, I'm just doing it all, right? So they used to call me super nurse, right? Like it's like I had a cape on my back. So I am taking care of her patients, and I see how exhausted she is. And I asked her, I said, Miss Audrey, I said, when are you going to retire? I said, you have been a nurse for 40 years. And I promise you, Miss Audrey, she was 65 years old and she was a nurse for 40 years. Okay, so she fit the script to the T. So I said, when are you going to retire? You have been in the nursing field. You have been a nurse for 40 years. When are you going to retire? You're 65. She said, Christina, I'm not ready to retire. And I said, why not? And she's like, I'm going to wait until I'm 67 and a half because Social Security is going to give me an extra $300. And I'm like, what? I said, Miss Audrey, you're going to work another 2.5 years for an extra $300? And she's like, yes, I'm not ready to retire. I have to wait. And when I tell you, I was extremely heartbroken. And I felt so sad for her because I saw how tired she was. And I made that decision right then and there. I said, I'm not going to be Miss Audrey. I am not going to wait until I'm 67 and a half or 65 in order to retire. And I'm not going to depend on Social Security. And I'm not going to be in the nursing field for 40 years. Like, do you know how much of a toll it takes on your body, right? To be standing for 12 hours, to be doing all the heavy lifting, all this stuff. Like I can go on, right? So I said, so I made the decision right then and there at 24 years old. I said, I'm only going to give myself 10 years in this career. Like I'm not going to do 40 years. Right? And I'm so grateful that I was able to witness that, right? So unfortunately, that same day after work, Miss Audrey, she was coming out of the parking lot and she hit the tree right in front of the emergency room and she died on impact. She never made it home. She never made it to 67 and a half. She never made it to collect her Social Security check. So I don't want you to be like Miss Audrey. I didn't want to be like Miss Audrey. So do not wait. A lot of us, we think that we have until tomorrow in order to get our affairs in order, and we don't. We think that Social Security is going to be around. It's not. So do not buy into what society wants you to believe. You got to be unconventional. You got to go on your own. You have to depend on yourself. You have to establish your own foundation so that you can set yourself free. So that's how I was able to retire myself at 31 years old because I made the decision when I was 24. I said, I'm only going to be in this career for 10 years. I'm going to retire young. I'm going to retire young so I can enjoy my life. I don't want to be tied to the hospital 12 hours a day. And it's so like it was so stressful. Like I was working in the cardiac unit, right? So my patients are having heart attacks, they're going for open heart surgery, they're coming back with like big incisions. Like it was just they were dying left and right. And do you know how stressful that is? Like I'm cutting my lifespan in half. So I decided, no, I'm not. Like, yeah, this is a great career, but there's something else that I can do. And what it is that I started investing in real estate, right? And that's how I was able to retire young and live off my portfolio so that I don't have to go to work. So that's what I want you to know. I want you to know that you can do the same exact thing. And so what I just showed you, the wealth building formula, that's exactly what I did. That's exactly what you can do too, right? So I have a few more slides and then I'm going to open up the floor for Q&A. So hold on for me one second. Okay, so you want to put yourself in a position to where you own nothing but control everything. That is extremely powerful. And I'm going to say it again. Put yourself in a position to where you own nothing but control everything. That is the definition of stewardship, right? That is where you're being a good steward of your wealth. You're being a good steward of the assets, right? You're making sure that they grow. You're making sure that they're conserved and preserved, right? Versus ownership. So once again, it's that programming that society has given us, which is you want to be the proud owner of your house. You want to be the proud owner of your car. You want to be the proud owner of the bank account with the $100,000. No, you do not, right? Because we have bought into, because we bought into it, right? We bought into ownership, right? And so you have to understand that that house is still going to be there. So if you don't wake up tomorrow, that house is still going to be there. So you have to think about it. Is ownership what you want? It really isn't, right? What you really, really, really want is to have control over that house while you're living. And that's what stewardship can give you because that house is going to be owned by the trust. You're going to be the controller of the trust, which means you're going to control the house while you're living. That is what you want. So you want stewardship versus ownership, okay? So just make sure. Now, a lot of us, we don't ask ourselves this question, how am I going to transfer wealth, right? So how are you going to transfer the wealth to the next generation? And the way that you're going to do that when it comes to a trust is through trust certificate units, which are TCUs. So what happens is just like you have stock certificates for a corporation, you're going to have trust certificate units for a trust, and that's going to show the beneficial interest of the beneficiary, okay? And so you're going to give it to your beneficiaries. The trust is going to establish 100 units. Then you're going to give them to your beneficiaries. So let's just say I'm one of your beneficiaries and you give me 25 units. The 25 units represent 25% of beneficial interest. Let's just say there's $1 million in the trust. I'm entitled to 250,000 because I have 25% of beneficial interest, okay? So that's the next component. And then the last one is preservation of wealth, right? So there's two tools that you need when you're preserving your wealth. You need the trust and you need the life insurance policies. Why? Because a trust is going to insure everything. A trust has a house in it, it has homeowners insurance. A trust has a car, it has automobile insurance. A trust has cash, it has FDIC. So you are considered a human asset. The trust needs to be able to insure you, the human asset, right? And so that's why the trust is going to take out a policy on you, right? Because if anything happens to you, the trust is going to be devastated and the trust needs to be compensated for that loss, right? So if you don't wake up tomorrow, that death benefit is going to go to the trust. Because remember what I said in the previous slide, the trust is going to be the owner, the payer, and the beneficiary. So if anything happens, that $1 million goes straight to the trust, right? Now, it's vitally important that the trustee is the one that is going to take out a policy on themselves, on all of the trustees, all of the beneficiaries, and all of the future beneficiaries. Now, these future beneficiaries, they're called trust fund babies. So you know how a trust fund baby gets a negative connotation? Well, it should really get a positive connotation because being born into a trust organization is actually one of the most advantageous things that can happen to a human being. Okay, it is an absolute privilege to be a trust fund baby, right? Because just imagine this baby is born into the trust organization. So that means that a beneficiary just had a child, right? And so now that this baby is born, right, the first thing that happens is the trustee is going to take out a policy on that baby once that baby is at least 30 days old. And so now the trust is going to be paying a $100 premium, $100, $100, $100, $100 every single month for that trust fund baby. That trust fund baby is going to grow up, right? So let's just say that now the trust fund baby is 18 years old, right? They grew up, they're 18 years old, right? And so now they're going off to college and they're like, hey, I need a set of Hot Wheels, right? And so they want to go ahead and purchase their first vehicle. So what's going to happen is you're going to put yourself, they're going to put themselves in a position where they can clearly go ahead and go down to the dealership, right, and get a vehicle, right? So they can go ahead and pull their credit, get into a high interest loan, paying $1,000 for a $30,000 car. Or because they're a trust fund baby, they can go to the trust organization. They can ask the trustee, hey, trustee, can I get a loan for $30,000 so I can buy my first car? So the trustee is going to write them a check, hand it over, and give them the money so that they're able to go ahead and purchase that vehicle, right? And so now, because we want the trust fund baby to have some type of financial responsibility, we're going to say, hey, you have to give the trust $300 every single month versus you giving $1,000 to the dealership. So now the trust fund baby is giving the trust $300, $300, $300. And let's just say that they decide to default. They're like, hey, I don't want to give the trust $300 anymore, right? And so that default is perfectly okay. And the reason being is because the loan did not originate from the trust, right? The funds for the loan didn't originate from the trust. The funds for the loan originated from the trust fund baby's life insurance policy, right? So once that trust fund baby went to the trustee in order to get that loan, right? The trustee contacted the carrier and requested a policy loan. And so the carrier looked at the cash value that been accumulating since birth, and they're like, yep, $30,000 direct deposit, right? And so that's where the money originated from. And so those policy loans do not have to be paid back. Those policy loans are automatically deducted from the death benefit. So that means that that loan is it's okay that it's defaulted because that loan is going to be automatically paid back once the trust fund baby transitions, right? And so now that trust fund baby has a death benefit of $5 million, right? And so once that trust fund baby transitions, that $5 million is going straight into the trust account because the trust is the beneficiary of their policy, and that $5 million is going to replenish the trust, right? And so that's what preservation of wealth looks like, right? A lot of us, we're walking around here talking about we're building generational wealth, but no, you're not. You cannot walk around here talking about you're building generational wealth when you don't even have the tools for generational wealth, right? Where you don't have a trust, where you don't have the life insurance policies, right? And so why is it that a lot of us will see famous families, right? We'll see athletes and they are losing their wealth, right? They are either blowing the money in their generation or it's not even lasting the second and third generation. Do you know that 90% of wealthy families lose their wealth by the second and sometimes the third generation? The reason being is because they do not have the tools for preservation. So you need to have these tools if you actually want the wealth to reach the next generation. If you want it to reach the fifth, sixth, 10th, 15th generation, you have to think of how am I going to transfer my wealth? How am I going to conserve the wealth? How am I going to preserve the wealth? Right? It's so vitally important. So these are the books that I recommend. What Would the Rockefellers Do is a really good book teaching you about the connection between life insurance and the trust. The Art of Passing the Buck, Volume 1 and 2, teaches you about trusteeship. Family Wealth teaches you how to run your family like a business, right? All of us should be running our family like a business to where you're the CEO of your family, your spouse is the CFO of your family, your children are secretaries, right? And then the last one is the Complete Book of Trust, which teaches you about the different types of trust, right? This is so vitally important. You want to take action on this information because it could be your new way of doing business, your new way of saving taxes, your new way of protecting your assets, right?
Just to
So this is just a quick video.
Well, kudos to you all. Again, Christina, it's been a wonderful experience. I've been looking at your videos on YouTube for a while, and there are a number of people offering trust these days, and I guess that's the big thing. Don't own anything, control everything. That kind of, I didn't say it correctly, but that is the sentiment. And so it seems like the playing field is being leveled now from the rich and people who weren't privy to this information. So thank you for being such a great asset to a community that didn't have this information. And you made it so simple. Thank you for the recordings. Thank you for the step-by-step instructions, things that we can go back and look at. So we do appreciate you. And thank you, Mondo. That was a great explanation of infinite banking. I know a number of people are talking about that, but they make it so complex. And his presentation was nice and succinct and very informative. So this has been an overall great experience. I definitely will recommend you to others.
All right, guys, so let's work together. I do have a program teaching you guys step by step how to implement the wealth building formula, right? This is how to establish the trust, how to get OPM, how to go ahead and do infinite banking with your life insurance policies, right? How to acquire real estate. It teaches you all those things step by step. So you can either do it yourself through our course. So our course has all of the video modules that you need, and then you get access through to all three of the trusts that I mentioned, which is the business trust, the family trust, and the tax exempt nonprofit trust. So you get the 3 trust templates. So what you do is you'll go ahead and play the video modules, you'll download the templates, you'll start customizing your trust, right? So that you're able to do this on your own, right? And you'll learn step by step. Is very thorough. You do get lifetime access to the course, and you do get access to resources and ebooks. So all the books that I mentioned in the previous slide, you get all of those electronically. And some of those books, if you try to purchase them on Amazon, it'll cost you over $800, right? And then we do have a community. So it's a private community on Facebook, and then we have a Telegram chat for our community members as well. So in our community, we have over 2,500 trustees that have been operating for years. So they have their houses, their businesses, investments, crypto, you name it, in their trust. And you get to learn from these individuals. You get full-time access, to them. And you are able to network with like-minded individuals, which is extremely powerful. So the course is only $997. Now, the second option is Done With You. Done With You is where we do it together in a group. And it's done live on Zoom, just like how we are on Zoom right now. So it's done live. It's a week long. So it's going to be next week, Monday through Friday. Okay. So on next week, on Monday, we're going to focus on the business trust. So I'm going to break down every single paragraph of the trust so that you can understand the contents of the trust. When I tell you that you have to know what's inside of the trust in order for you to be able to operate it efficiently and effectively, that's why I take my time and I'm very thorough in breaking down the contents of the trust, because then that's going to boost up your confidence to know, yes, I can operate as a trustee. Do you know how many people that I speak to that they have set up trusts by other organizations and they're afraid to use it. They don't know what's inside of the trust. They made all these mistakes, right? And so we want to help you avoid that. And so we've seen that in other places, you just don't get the support that you need. So here we are extremely supportive. We hold your hand through the whole process. So on Monday, that's the business trust. After we go through the entire trust indenture, then I open up the floor for Q&A so I can answer any and all questions that you might have. Tuesday, we focus on the family trust. So once again, I break down every single paragraph so you can understand what's inside of the trust, the contents of the trust, and then we open up the floor for Q&A. Wednesday, we focus on the tax-exempt nonprofit trust. So I go through and break down every single paragraph of the trust constitution and bylaws. And then I show you guys how to get your tax-exempt EIN number. And if you want to become ordained, you can also do that as well. And then we dive into Q&A so I can answer any and all questions that you have. Now, just imagine being in this environment where you have other individuals that are asking really good questions that you didn't even know you wanted to know, right? And so you get to learn more now because you're piggybacking off of the other like-minded individuals in the Zoom, right? It's extremely powerful. Now, Thursday, we're going to focus on OPM, other people's money, specifically the bank's money. So I'm going to give you a list of banks. I'm going to show you step by step how to open up your bank account for the trust fund, and then we're going to go through banking procedures and operations, and then how to document how much you're going to fund the trust with. And then our funding manager is going to come in, and he has over a decade of experience in all of the banking relationships that you could ever need. And so he's going to come in and teach you step by step how to establish business credit and business funding so that you're able to get the money that you need to acquire the assets, okay? Specifically, if you want to acquire real estate, if you want to put that money into your life insurance policies. So we'll show you step by step, okay? So our funding manager will show you that. Then we dive into Q&A, so you can ask him any and all questions. You can ask me any and all questions. And then the last day of the workshop, which is Friday, we focus on asset protection and taxes, okay? So as far as asset protection, I'm going to show you step by step how to transfer all of your assets correctly, okay? So I'm going to show you how to transfer your real estate into the trust, how to transfer your vehicles into the trust, how to transfer your businesses into the trust. And then after that, our CPA is going to come in and he's going to teach you how to file taxes for your trust and answer all of your trust tax questions, right? So that's extremely powerful for you to be able to have those educators and resources readily available for you. Okay, so then we dive into Q&A. So that's the workshop. You have lifetime access to the workshop. That means each and every time that we do a workshop, which is every 3 to 4 weeks, you're able to dive into the workshop, get refreshed, and you can go ahead and attend it Monday through Friday, right? So you get that sense of security to know that you're setting up your trust the right way because you have our guidance and support, and we're able to do it, now, right? So you don't have to wait for your questions to be answered. You get to ask your questions on the spot and get them answered on the spot, right? So the workshop is only $2,500, and then the last option is done for you. This is where my team and I are able to set up all 3 of your trusts for you. We apply for all of your EINs and we transfer all of your assets, like the house, the car, the businesses, right? So you get individualized support, you get your trust customized, and these are for individuals that have like multiple businesses, multiple assets, and they just want to be hands off, right? So they still get access to the course and to attend the workshops, but they don't have to do it themselves, right? So everything is done for them. So the done for you package is $7,500, right? So you just get to choose which one is best for you. And then from there, you are able to enroll. So the way that you enroll is you can go to our website. Our website is wealthytrusty.com. You can also send us an email. You can visit us on social media, and you can respond to the text message where you receive the link for this webinar, okay? So now those of you guys that are willing to take action within the next 24 hours, we want to give you 20% off because our workshop is next week, Monday through Friday. So if you're ready to take action in the next 24 hours, then you can enjoy 20% off using the discount code TRUST20. And if you're unable to pay in full, then you can at least put a deposit down and that will secure your position for getting 20% off. So the deposit is only $200 and the links are inside of the chat. So I want to be able to answer any questions that you might have. But first, what I want to do is I want to show you what one of our trust templates looks like. So hold on one second. Let me dive in there. So this is one of our trust templates. Hold on one second. Okay, so when you are first setting up the trust, right, everything that you see in red is what you're going to be customizing, right? So that, and when I tell you we break down every single paragraph of the trust, this is all of the provisions, right, that are going to protect your assets. And so you need to know and understand what's inside of your trust for you to really be able to operate it. Okay, and so that's just an example. And then this is what our actual course looks like. Okay, so when you enroll into any of the programs, you get access to the course. Okay, so if you're doing the workshop, if you're doing done for you, you get access to the program. And what you do is initially you're going to start after induction, you're going to start with the trust entity. So you learn what a trust is, you learn about the different parties involved, which is the grantors, trustees, beneficiaries, successors, protectors, the different types of trust. Then you learn how to set up the tax exempt trust. You learn how to set up the family trust. You learn how to set up the business trust. Then we go into tax strategies where you learn about tax exemption, about the distributable net income, things like that, how to avoid tax evasion, right? This is not what we do. We pay our taxes, right? And so our CPA will teach you all of that. And then we go into asset protection where you take an inventory of your assets so that you know which assets you have and which assets don't qualify to go inside the trust. Then you learn how to open up your bank accounts, your brokerage accounts, how to transfer your deeds for your property, your vehicles, your insurance policies, your businesses, and how to do the infinite banking with the life insurance policies, and how to have a board meeting, right? A lot of us were operating entities like LLCs and corporations, and we never had a meeting for it. So we show you how to do things the right way, step by step. Then we dive into wealth creation, where you can learn about OPM, how to establish the business credit, and then how to invest in the stock market, and then how to do the infinite banking. Then we teach you about the legacy crest, and then you have all your resources and your ebooks. So as far as the resources go, inside of the resources, we have everything that you need in order to operate a trust. Meaning, if you need to have a board meeting, we have the templates. If you need to file taxes, we have the templates. If you need to transfer your house, we have the templates, right? If you need to do anything for the trust, we have the templates readily available inside of the resources. So with that being said, I want to go ahead and open up the floor for Q&A. So do you guys have any questions? I will also look inside of the chat. But I know that we covered a lot in this webinar. I really thank you for staying on the entire time. So I will answer any questions that you guys might have. Let me see. Can you use a whole life policy instead of IUL? Yes, you can. And if you already have your policy, you just have to contact your carrier and let them know that you want to go ahead and change the ownership, the payer information, and the beneficiary information. Which trust is taking out the life insurance policies? The family trust. So yes, thank you, Sarah. That was a wonderful question. What does ordain mean? So when it comes to your faith-based organization, which is the tax-exempt charitable trust, if you want to run it like a ministry, you can get ordained as a minister. So a lot of us choose to do it that way. But that's, you know, the religious route. Some people, they establish schools, they do education programs for youth. Some people, they just do traditional charities where they're like doing stuff overseas in Africa, things of that nature. So you just determine how you want to establish it. Do you want to establish it like a church, or do you want to establish it for religious purposes, or do you want to not be involved in religion and deal with just traditional charity? Or do you want to run it like an educational program or like a school? So some people have established schools. Do you need a license to do the trust? Do you need a license to do the trust for other people? So you are able to set up your own contracts. So these are operating under common law. So you're able to go ahead and, create your own. So is the nonprofit incorporated? So you get to decide if you want to incorporate it or not. So initially, it is not, it's unincorporated. And if you want to, for example, get grants or government funding, then you will go ahead and incorporate it through the Secretary of State. Rue?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hi. So I understand that the beneficiary of the business trust is the family trust. So if you don't have an LLC and you're operating the business trust as a business and the business trust gets sued, the family trust being the beneficiary, do they go after the family trust because that's who's benefiting from that, or it doesn't go that far?
No, it doesn't. They don't go after any party involved in the contract.
Okay. And also, as far as the family trust, if you're someone that doesn't have kids, because you said like the beneficiaries would be your kids or whatever. What if you don't have family or kids? How would you structure that?
You can make another entity. So some people have made like their church. Some people just have it with no beneficiary for right now because they plan on having children in the future. Some people put parents because they don't have children. They don't know if they're going to have children. And so you have to think about it from the standpoint of if I don't wake up tomorrow, who do I want to have this house? It
Right.
might it might be a sibling.
Right.
So
Okay.
put that person. You can always change the beneficiary.
So, but I can do it that there's no beneficiary and I can still start a trust that way.
Yeah.
And also, if I am the no beneficiary, but the family trust is what operates as like how you take care of yourself. You pay your rent or your car note, like you were saying, utilities. If there's no beneficiary to that trust, how can I take care of myself through a family trust if it's only me?
That's a really good question. So, it's inside of the trust indenture that all of the expenses dealing with the trustee, while they're on trust business is going to be covered. So your rent is going to be covered. If you're on trust business, your food is going to be covered, your health insurance, life insurance, all that stuff is going to be covered as long as you're rendering that service as a trustee. So it's inside of the trust contract for the trust to be able to cover those things for you automatically.
Okay. And then the 508 is also a trust. So who would be the beneficiary of like the church or like the non-profit?
So it cannot be a natural person. It has to be another entity. So it could be another church, another charity, or another trust, or an LLC, or a corporation, domestic or foreign.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you for being so thorough and so
Okay.
like you can actually like learn a lot just from the free stuff. So I appreciate you so much.
Woo woo. Thank
All
you
right,
so
thank
much. I
you.
appreciate you being here. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, let me check the chat to see if there's any other questions in there. Can I transfer my military TSP or Roth in there? So with your retirement accounts, it depends. So some of them do have to remain in your personal name, especially if it's like a pension. But if you have any that are outside of your employer, like your Roth IRA or your traditional IRA, those can go into the trust. And so you can just contact the firm in order to let them know that you want to change the ownership of those accounts. So you are quite a wealth of information. Is it too late to build wealth if you are 55 to 60? No, this is the perfect time to build wealth, right? When you're 55. 55 is actually very young. 55, 60 is very young. My dad, he just turned 73 yesterday. So imagine you building wealth for, you know, 13 to 18 years. That's enough time. It doesn't take that long. That's what I wanted you guys to know. It does not take that long. So when I when I made the decision, I was 24 and I replaced my entire income by the time I was 31. So, or even 30. So, and I retired at 31. So it took me 6 years, um, which is not a long time. So I want you guys to know that this is a journey. Okay, this is not get rich quick. This is not overnight. This is not any of that stuff. This is being intentional. This is implementation. This is getting the knowledge and applying it. This is what that is. This is not you being fearful, not you sitting on the fence, not you having analysis paralysis, because that's just not going to work, right? You have to actually apply what you're learning here. And it frustrates me when I talk to people and they're like, yeah, I've been knowing about trust for 10 years. And it's like, why haven't you established one, right? Why haven't you done anything if you've known about this for 10 years, right? So don't be that person, right? Be the action taker, be the person that is willing to look fear in the face and say, I'm going to do it anyways. Be that person that is going to, break the chains of poverty in your family, right? That's what I was. I was the generational curse breaker in my family, right? And so I know that that's what you are. You are the generational curse breaker in your family. So it takes that one person to have that courage, right? And to take that leap of faith and for you to sacrifice and say, well, I'm going to go ahead and build a foundation here and leave a legacy. I'm going to go ahead and learn everything I need to learn in order to establish a trust, right? I'm going to do it for our family, for our last name, right? So it takes that one person, and you know who that one person is in every family, right? It's the grandpa or the grandma that their name lives forever because they bought land, because they started a business, because they decided to take action. And so that's what I want for you. I want you to take action because now, as I mentioned, right, this could be changing the trajectory of your entire life and of your children's life, right? Your kids, right? Because now, last time I checked, they cannot inherit your position at work, but they can inherit their position within the trust. They can be appointed as beneficiaries today, and you can raise them to be trustees, and then they can take over as your successor and they can become trustees. That is what you want. You want to raise trustees, right? That is extremely powerful. Just imagine you having family meetings, right? In wherever, in Dubai, in China, in, Hawaii. And this is all expenses paid by the trust. And you are teaching them the fundamentals of trusteeship, right? So you're going to be changing not only their trajectory, but their kids. It takes that one person, I promise you. And that one person is you. That's why you're on this call today. So just take action on the information that I shared with you tonight. Do your own research. You don't have to even believe a word that I'm saying. I'm just telling you what worked for me and what worked for many other people. So with that being said, we're going to adjourn the webinar. Thank you so much for everything, for being here tonight. And we do have a replay. It's on YouTube. So go ahead and click the link. Please subscribe to the channel and share the replay link with any friends or family that you feel could really benefit from this information. Because it is valuable information and it can unlock some things mentally, because it is going to take a mindset shift. That's what I would tell you for sure, right? A lot of us were just so used to the programming, right? You have to understand they programmed us from birth, but even from kindergarten, like if you sit back and you look at what's happening, right, from kindergarten all the way to high school, right, we were taught to go into an institution for 7 to 8 hours a day, from 8 to 5, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and then you have evenings and weekends off. And then once we got out of there, same thing in college. And then after that, same thing in our career, right? And so this is how we were institutionalized. You have to understand this was strategic, right? It was intentional. So you have to unlearn a lot of things and you have to get rid of the programming in order for you to really be free. And so that's one thing that I'm big on. I am really big on freedom, location freedom, financial freedom, time freedom. Get your time back, right? And the way that you're going to get your time back is by you creating an entity, right? And then having that entity build wealth that's going to replace your 9 to 5 income so you don't have to trade your time for money anymore. Time is the only thing that you will never get back. Time is the most valuable thing. Why do you think that you trade your time and they give you money? Because your time is valuable, right? So it's super important. So you want that time freedom. You want that location freedom too. Because a lot of us, we have to go and request time off in order to go on a vacation, right? But no, if you're living off of your rental income, or if you're living off of a portfolio or a business or anything like that, you can be anywhere in the world. Literally, you could be anywhere in the world, right? I'm not home right now. Tomorrow I'm going to Chicago. Today I'm in Los Angeles, right? So you could be anywhere, and that's also a gift for you to have flexibility like that, right? And then financial freedom, right? For you to just wake up and not even think about a bill, right? You don't have to worry about where your next meal is going to come from. You don't have to worry about putting bacon on the table. You don't have to worry about receiving a direct deposit every 2 weeks, right? Because your trust is generating passive income. And that's the best type of income, is passive income. You do not want to work for money. The way that you're going to generate passive income is by having the money work for you. Please, if you change the way that you think and stop thinking that you have to work for money and start thinking, now my money has to work for me. I have to pimp out this money. I have to place this money somewhere where it's going to work, somewhere where it's going to go out and bring back friends, right? To where it's going to go out, get pregnant, have multiples, and come back with everything, right? With babies, right? That's how you have to think, right? And that is what the wealthy do, and that is what you need to do. That is what you need to do, right? Even, for example, so one, like I said, right, one of those vehicles is the life insurance, right? But a lot of people, for example, with the banks, right? A lot of people think that the banks, they're getting rich off of, selling your mortgage, right? But in actuality, their number one asset is life insurance. So if you look it up, because this is what I want for you, I want you to do research and to look. If you hear something come out of my tongue, go Google it, right? Go do your research. Go call the bank and ask them, right? So the bank, their number one asset is life insurance, right? It's called BOLI, BOLI, bank-owned life insurance. So if their number one asset is life insurance, what do you think your number one asset should be? My trust has 5 policies. 5. My death benefit is $2.8 million. If I don't wake up tomorrow, I have 3 children, they're set, right? But I use it for the living benefits. Why? Because I'm accumulating cash and the cash is compounding. So majority of my wealth is sitting inside of those 5 life insurance policies. I don't have it sitting in the bank. Why not? Because the bank is not giving me anything. The bank is giving you 0.000 something percent. Your money that's sitting inside of the bank, first of all, is not there because we live in a fractional reserve system. Second of all, it's just there dying. You're not making any money off of your money sitting in the bank. So you have to put it somewhere where it's going to multiply. Please, 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 please. Let me see. I see a couple more questions. Where are you speaking tomorrow in Chicago? I am not speaking in Chicago. I said I'm going to be in Chicago. The next question is, I just bought in. Thanks for 20% off and new mentor programming. Oh, George, you're so welcome. Congratulations. Welcome to the Wealthy Trustee program. Welcome, 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 welcome. So we're going to hit the ground running next week for the workshop. It's Monday through Friday from 11 in the morning to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay. So please be there and be square because it is going to blow your mind. Like the beautiful young lady, Ruth, she was like, oh, yeah, you can learn a lot from the free stuff. Just imagine the stuff that you have to pay for. Like you're going to learn way more. If you just learned a lot from the free stuff, it's times 100. So, what you're going to learn in the workshop is going to absolutely blow your mind, blow your mind. So congratulations, George. I'm so glad that you took that leap of faith. And we look forward to welcoming you. And there's a lot of pre-work that you need to do. So go through the whole onboarding because there's like 7 or 8 foundational videos to prepare you for the workshop that we have that is starting on Monday. And let's see. Does this work equivalent in every state? Yeah, it is. So remember, I told you that there's something called non-statutory, right? So that means that you don't want to have the state statutes and codes embedded inside of the contract. So none of the trust indentures have state statutes and codes, which means that you can operate it in all 50 states plus all of the U.S. territories like Puerto Rico and Guam and Virgin Islands. So yes. He said, "Oh, enjoy the Windy City." So my son is a wide receiver, and I'm taking him to camp at Northwestern University. So that's why I'm going to be in Chicago, taking my football player over there to play football. So this is my second time listening, and I tested your words. This is why I bought in great value. Plus, I'm watching my family go through probate. Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry. And um, see, this is a true testimony because a lot of people have either gone through probate or they have witnessed someone go through probate. And it could be long and drawn out. It could be a very nasty process. It could take years, sometimes even decades. Just imagine you being in court for 2 years and 3 years. Where do you think that money is dissipating? Where do you think it's going? Do you know how much court fees that you're racking up? Right? You're going to be left with nothing. But sometimes families, they can't get along. So, they need the courts to get in between them, and that's not what you want. So you want to do anything and everything in your power to protect what you work so hard for. Trust me, like me, myself, I haven't worked so hard for someone to just be able to wipe it away. No, and the fact that I have 3 children. Like what? Like my children are going to get 100% of everything. I'm not going to leave not one penny for the government to be able to take it away. Like me, myself, Christina, like broke on paper. She don't have nothing, no assets. That's the way that you want it to be. For someone to be able to look you up and say, she don't have a house, she don't have a car, she don't have nothing. She don't even have a bank account. There's not even a dollar in there. That is what you want. But society programmed us the other way. They said, don't you want the car in your name? Okay, sign. Don't you want the house in your name? The bank account in your name? So don't believe everything that you have been conditioned to think because that is generational, right? Your mom did it. Your mom did it. Your mom's mom did it, right? And so now you're doing it, right? So it takes that one person to break those chains and say, I'm doing it a different way now, because the way that we've been doing it obviously is not working, because I'm not inheriting anything. You didn't inherit anything. Grandma didn't inherit anything. So we're not doing it the right way. We're doing it the way that society has intended it for us to do it, which is to depend on the government and to rely on Social Security and to rely on, just everything. So no, we're doing things differently. So with that being said, you guys have an amazing evening. I love you guys so much. Thank you for staying on. If you need any help or support, my staff is here. So you can go ahead and text the number 305-749-9215. We'll be able to answer any questions. We're here to support you, and we look forward to seeing you in the workshop, okay? The workshop is starting in a couple of days. What's today, Wednesday? So it's starting on Monday. But there's a lot of pre-work that you want to do before to prepare yourself for the workshop, okay? In the workshop, we're not going to teach you what a trust is. We're going to hit the ground running and show you how to set up the business trust, because our time is limited. We're only together for like 20 hours. So, you have homework. All right. Good night, everybody. Bye. Thank you.